This is An Immigrant's Life. I'm Aaron Deliosa. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate you for joining me no matter what or when you're tuning in. If you haven't already, please consider clicking the subscribe button to officially join the Immigrant Nation community, wherever podcasting platform you are listening from. And you can also become a part of this community by following us on social media at An Immigrant's Life. That's where I post additional content about the episode and sometimes about my life. Also, if you or someone you know is interested in being guests on our podcast, feel free to reach out via social media or by sending an email to animmigrantslife@yahoo.com. Let's connect and share your unique story. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. Today, I'm thrilled for you to listen to a conversation I had with an amazing artist. He reveals his personal journey of returning to the rosary and the profound way he reconciles his Catholic faith with his LGBTQ identity. We dive into the landscape of LGBTQ acceptance in the Philippines, and we explore how he uses Baybayin as a powerful tool for creating Filipino spaces, and his goals for his Baybayin art. This episode is filled with engaging insights, personal stories, and inspiring moments. So let's not waste more time. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is not only a Baybayin artist, but also a community organizer. His Baybayin art beautifully weaves culture and creativity, while his energy inspires communities to organize. Everyone, please welcome Mark Libatique.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, man. Thank you for coming on the podcast, man. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for reaching out. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I haven't said it to you, but we have actually a connection, a fire connection. Other than Ali, you know Jose Reyes?
Jose, yeah, he interviewed me like this time last year. Yeah.
Yes. So he was a former guest.
Oh, great. I'm going to reach out to him right after this call. I'm going to tell him that.
That's what I told Ali when Ali connected you to me. I said, yo, I know this dude.
Oh, shit. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So you're like in my radar, but I'm like, I don't know. I have this sometimes inferiority complex once, like, I don't know. Maybe he's too cool for me. I don't know.
Absolutely not. No, I'm so excited to talk to anybody. And like, my craft is very nerdy. It's born out of like a very nerdy part of my brain, like that, like just kind of like that nerdy, like, loving languages type thing. And so, there's absolutely no type of person that I wouldn't be geeking out and like have no problem talking to about this stuff.
Appreciate that. Before we move on, why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you and promote your art?
Yes. So right now I am exclusively on Instagram. That's kind of like my main way of connecting with people. TK Baybayin is the Instagram handle. But I'm working on getting an online shop set up, and that handle is where you can kind of reach out to me for kind of opportunities connecting around specific commissions, or if you want like speaking engagements or workshops, especially in like the New York tri-state area. That's where I kind of like set all of that up. So look for me on Instagram, and that's where I'll make announcements about kind of like expanding into other kind of like media and things like that.
Amazing. Yes, it's one thing we have another in common is I actually got back to Baybayin this year. I started doing calligraphy. I have a page, but
awesome.
I haven't done anything in a while because I'm super busy. So
I mean, it looks like you are, so that's a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. But I love like seeing other artists' calligraphy style. I'm like, yo, that's cool how he did that. Like how he went to the left, or he used heart instead of a cross, or something like that.
Right. Oh, exactly. Especially when it comes to the technical aspects of Baybayin. Like I also love looking at different. Like the community is, it's small, right? So you can kind of like we can drop the same names and we can talk about like specific styles, and like the styles are growing as the years go by and as more and more people know about it. So yeah, that's definitely something that I do as well.
Yeah, exactly. For the people that doesn't know, could you educate them quickly about Baybayin?
Yes, so Baybayin is the Tagalog name for one of the writing systems that was used in pre-colonial Philippine times um, to write down the indigenous languages of the Philippines. So it wasn't the system that was used for all of them. We're a country of dozens and dozens of languages, and regions have different kind of like interpretations of the writing system, but it's one of the many. It was descended from Sanskrit. It has relations with like the script that is written to write used to write like Japanese, Thai, these other Southeast Asian languages, and so you can kind of like see those relationships when you travel Southeast Asia and you see those writing systems. Obviously, in the Philippines itself, it was quickly replaced during colonization by the Spanish language and the Spanish alphabet, and so today 99.9% of Filipinos can neither read it nor recognize it. But now there's like a small group of artists and calligraphers and researchers who are trying
Mm.
to kind of, unearth this aspect of our indigenous identity and, rebirth it for the modern age and try to kind of like make it a piece or a source of pride in
Mm.
our indigenous heritage, and also kind of make we envision a future in which is actually a little bit more practical than artistic,
Mm.
and so a lot of calligraphers and artists are like kind of blending those two things together because it's a functional writing system, and it's theoretically possible to use it as such in the near future.
Mm.
So I'm here in the New York area, and I tend to be kind of like the person who's called for kind of local commissions, and that's kind of my reputation here.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, you mentioned earlier that it's somehow based on Sanskrit. I read somewhere that it was quote unquote proven that it wasn't based on Sanskrit. Do you have like how do you know that it was based on Sanskrit? Just
Well, it's a relative of kind of like the systems or the family systems, the writing systems.
okay.
And so I guess like descendant of Sanskrit is not the most technically correct, but or accurate, but I guess you can say that it's part of just like the system of Abogidas that had developed in
Okay.
that area of the world. And so Sanskrit is in South Asia. The Abogidas that were created, and when I say Abogida, I mean like these specific types of writing system um, that are based off of syllables and phonetic kind of just like those specific types of phonetic units rather than letters. A letter is like a, b, right?
Mm.
But an abogida is ba, ke, la, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see that relationship in writing systems such as Sanskrit, such as Thai, and the Southeast Asian scripts like the Malay scripts. And so, yeah, it's I would say probably a distant cousin, more so.
Yeah, well said, well
Yeah.
said. Yeah, but I do actually prefer Baybayin because if you want to learn to read it, it's so easier because there's no silent letters. It's like what you see is what you're gonna say.
Yeah. And that has obviously also kind of like evolved out of over the centuries, right?
Mm.
There was a moment in time where it was a little bit more um, kind of like understood, like these silent final consonants and things like that.
Mm.
If you study like languages like Arabic, you'll notice that a lot of it is understood. There's not like some of the markings are removed because it's a language that relies on you understanding the language very fluently in order
Mm.
to be able to read it pretty fluently. And historically, that has been the case for languages that were written in Baybayin, but we have things like kudlits and things like that are now kind of like used to kind of create that context, which is a little bit more comfortable for us in the contemporary age.
Yeah, exactly. About the kudlit, because we know that it's either like a dot or a like a semicolon, a colon, or
Mhm, mhm.
and then the Spanish came, they had the cross. What's
Right.
your opinion about the cross?
I mean, the cross is practical.
Hmm.
The cross is obviously kind of like related to the idea that like the Spanish friars were trying to kind of use the language to evangelize and add their spin on it. So
Mm,
I'm not mad that the Kudlit was created. um, but I think artists today are free to kind of like take that and interpret it how they will.
mm,
Using kind of like curved strokes instead of the cross X's.
mm,
I've seen artists who kind of like do dots on both the top and the bottom of a character,
mm.
and that's kind of like one of the ways. And so it's also interesting to see over the years which one of those becomes a little bit more popular amongst different artists,
Yeah.
and which ones tend to be a little bit more distracting.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and so especially since like artists are interested in kind of like playing around with the different orientations, right? Horizontal versus vertical,
mm.
backwards, forwards, and things like that. Trying to mirror the brush style or the writing style of like Chinese or Japanese or these other East Asian languages. And so, yeah, that's always an interesting kind of like piece to it as well.
Yeah, I like what you said that it's we're letting the artist put their spin on it, and like, okay, they'll use the cross, but they're taking back the power. Like the word Indio,
Mm-hmm.
when Jose Rizal and those guys decide, like, yeah, you call us Indio, guess what? We're gonna call ourselves Indio.
Yeah, we will.
Taking back the
Yeah.
power of the word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that. Let's leave a little by buying just a little bit. Let's go personal. You said you live in New York, but originally from Jersey
Mm-hmm.
City.
Mm-hmm.
How who moved first to the States, and why Jersey City?
Yeah, very good, very deep question. So my family is originally, both my parents are from the town of Bawang in La Union. And
Beautiful
so
place, by the way.
I know, I mean, over the past decade or so, it's become, the last time I was there, it was like when I was a kid, it was like, just like a regular town right next to the water. But now it's like everybody mag-elyo tayo this weekend. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like watching all these videos on YouTube. But back in the day, it wasn't all that. It wasn't. It didn't have all of that. It was a more sleepy town. But yeah, my mom was part of like that wave of migrant nurses in the 70s and 80s who
Mm,
came to the United States because of the nursing shortage here in the United States during that time.
mhm.
And my father was an OFW who worked in Saudi during the 80s, and then he
So
eventually made his
textbook.
way. Yeah, it's the textbook. It's the textbook like Filipino American narrative.
Mm,
And they I think the matriarch of my mom's family chose kind of like the New York area first.
mm,
And she came here in the 70s. And then my mom followed, and I know it was part of like that historical kind of moment where the gates were opened for people from all over the world to come to the United States
mm,
after decades and decades of really, really strict immigration policy.
mhm,
And the Philippines, which was just very recently, since at that point, like a American colony, there was really, really strong ties there. Um, there was like a kind of like enthusiasm about moving to the United States. I mean, as Ilocanos, we had the option of moving to Hawaii, to California. I'm not really sure why we ended up in Jersey City, but there was a
you could have gone to Hawaii, dude.
we could have got to Hawaii. I mean, I was there 2 weeks ago, and everybody was Ilocano. It was like the standard non-English language, and like everybody who worked at the 7-Eleven and all of these, and it was kind of heaven for me in that sense because I never
Mm,
kind of like experienced that. Because the
mhm,
Filipino community, especially here in this area, is like it's much more cosmopolitan, and so like Tagalog is the language we use to communicate with each other. But
mhm,
being in Hawaii and just kind of like Ilocano being like
mm.
that kind of default was very special. But
Beautiful.
I think like most of my family who left the Philippines on both my mom and my dad's side, since they were from the same hometown, either ended up here or in the Toronto area, where I believe you
Mm.
are.
I'm from Montreal.
Oh, you're from Montreal. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of them um, ended up in the suburbs of Toronto, and
Mm,
so at least like twice a year, we either go up there or the extended family comes down here for like
that's
birthdays or
awesome.
anything. So it's like a very very like porous kind of membrane, like that border between the states and Canada for us. Um, but yeah, like Jersey City itself is it's a very diverse, very vibrant community of immigrants.
Mhm.
Um, we like to brag that we have like the ethnic or the racial breakdown of the city is like absolutely equal in terms of like the major groups. So it's like 25% like descendants of Europeans, Black, Hispanic, and then Asian. And
Mm.
then a huge portion of that Asian is actually Filipino. And then we have our ethnic enclave. And you know, it's like in addition to Queens, we kind of like make up like the big kind of like Filipino pockets
Mm.
of the tri-state area. And then we have like towns like Bergenfield and things like that in New Jersey. And kind of
Beautiful.
like those kind of like neighborhoods are like
Mm.
what makes up the Filipino area. And so, you know, people talk about New York and New Jersey, and like that's kind of like what they talk about. And like it's a small area geographically. You know, it's like I'm still like I'm only 5 miles from my house.
Oh, wow.
And so like I visit my family like every weekend, and like it's a very kind of just like a yeah, the border is very kind of like vague because
That's beautiful.
it's just like water, right? It's just like on the other side of the water.
Yeah. You mentioned
Yeah.
about Filipino community being big in Jersey, in New York, California,
Hmm.
but we don't really have like a quote unquote Filipino town. You know how Chinatown, there's
Yeah.
Italian. How come we don't have Filipino town?
I think, I mean, definitely in California, there are historic Filipino
Mm.
towns. And I know in Jersey City, there is a section of it that was historically kind of like where the Filipino migrants would go to,
Oh, sweet.
would migrate to. And a lot of those families have been there for multiple generations. When I was born, my family lived in kind of like where the Filipinos were.
Mm.
And it was called like the neighborhood of West Side. I personally grew up in the neighborhood of the Heights, and yeah, it was a little bit less. It was more decentralized, right?
Mm.
And so, um, I don't know. I don't know why like kind of the Filipino communities didn't stick to the Filipino towns the way that like Chinese communities kind of really kind of built it up over generations and generations. Maybe
Mm.
Filipinos are just addicted to migration. We need to keep moving. We need to
Yeah,
keep spreading out. I
perhaps.
don't know. Yeah.
Or also the bad side of us is the divide and conquer idea of the Spanish.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You
Yeah.
know how
I
it
mean,
is.
especially,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, like growing back home is like I'm Tagalog, by the way, and it's
Uh-huh.
like it was drilled in our heads, like, oh, these are Visayas or this is Ilocanos or we don't mix with them. Like, why? They're cool. They have
Uh-huh.
good food. Why not? You know. And I think
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, I think it's not 100% the reason, but I think that's adding to it.
I mean, I used when I was a kid growing up, we would have kind of like these little shadows of that, I guess.
Mm.
You know, I have like memories of like my my parents kind of walking me through the stereotypes, right? So it's just like,
I
oh,
want to
these
hear this
people.
because I don't hear anything,
Oh no!
because
Oh
I
my
only
god!
hear
I'm
it on
gonna
the
get
other
like canceled.
side. I hear it from my side. I don't hear it from the other side.
I mean, you know, there are stereotypes about how like people from certain ethnic groups tend to be a little bit more vain, and they're the ones who buy like the LV and things like that, and they kind of spend a lot of their money being showy. And then like and I know that the Ilocano stereotype is that we tend to get drunk a lot and we're not very intelligent. Like
And cheap.
that's and cheap. Like yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Ilocano kuripot. Like I had to like explain
yeah,
what that was to like my
yeah.
friends. Um, but I mean, I see that in myself as well. I'm really thrifty. Like I accomplish that stereotype very very
Mm.
much. um,
It's a good quality, by
like
the
but
way.
it's a good quality. Listen, I my savings account is excellent. Well, excellent. My credit is great, but yeah. But like but like growing up in like a place like Jersey City, or like
Mm.
if you were to grow up in Woodside in Queens, where like it's a much more diverse kind of set of Filipino backgrounds, like you definitely just kind of like default to like the pan Filipino kind of
Yeah,
identity.
yeah.
Yeah, just to neutralize it, but also because you're comparing yourself to other immigrant communities, and that's basically what they did as well. Like right,
Mm.
so I'm sure in the Hispanic community there are divisions or like, stereotypes within them, but like, when they're up against Asians, then they're Hispanic, and the same with like African communities and Middle Eastern and South Asian. So yeah, it was very natural for us to do that. But as I am growing older and I am interacting in more contexts with Filipinos from other parts of the states, and as well as people, Filipinos who came here for work or something as adults, and they're my peers, I'm like, oh, I'm getting to understand like different interpretations of the Filipino identity, and it's like really interesting because like there are aspects of being Filipino that I didn't realize were exclusively Filipino American, or even in more detail, I didn't realize they were Filipino American from the East Coast or Filipino American from New Jersey, right? So like even that stuff like is like I'm understanding or I'm learning that is different.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a Cambodian artist from Atlanta, Sokayun, and he's the first one that mentioned that to me. That like, yeah, I am Cambodian from Atlanta, but there's also Cambodian from California, and they have their own thing. Like it's Cambodian, but it's also American in California.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing about the diaspora is we are allowed to grow in different areas and we grow in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and it's definitely. I mean, like that's just kind of like the way that ethnicity kind of like functions, right? And as the idea that like an Irish American is so different from an Irish person from Ireland. I think with our community, we are still very, very close to that moment in history where we just came over here. As a huge group. I know the Filipinos were actually the first Asian group to come to the United States in the 16th century. Like,
come on, we don't travel alone. You know this. Even to malls, we're like 30 people together.
I know, but like en masse, right? Like, and creating these really, really sustaining communities. And so, as the generations go by, like I'm sure there's going to be like different kind of like, sometimes I fantasize about the idea of like Tagalog being kind of like reincarnated as with like like an American dialect, right? And so like maybe 3 generations from now, there's going to be American Tagalog, and it's going to sound really, really different, and we have people our generation who are like having kids, and those of us from the American side who are trying to relearn Tagalog or things like that, and just kind of pass that. For the purposes of passing it on, there's going to be an accent. There's going to be like cultural kind of influences there. So yeah, that's what I think about all the time.
I like that because even in the Philippines, the people that speak Tagalog or whatever you speak, they have different accents. So that's why I love when you say that there's different accents from like Jersey, or if you're a sibling, if you're an offspring of a person that moved from La Union and then he moved to Jersey, and then you have kids, they speak a different way, which I loved our language. I love that spice,
Yeah, no, the variety is really, really special. And I think like the North America is huge, and like, the Filipinos that we're dispersed everywhere. And so, I can't wait for a future where like you actually see regional variations in our Filipino kind of like speech, that's like, it's cool. It's cool to think about. It's like we're colonizing the colonizers.
slowly but surely, But
slowly.
Speaking of language, I saw that you speak French, parle français, and Mandarin.
Oui, je parle français. Wait. And I also,
where did you learn?
I actually spent school. I was just such a language nerd. Like my high school was didn't have too many options when it came to languages compared to other high schools. But I studied French in high school, and then there was this one at one point they started offering Mandarin, and I took that up too. It was like an after school thing, and I was just really enthusiastic. I thought Chinese looked really cool. And then I continued with it, and in university, I minored in both of them. And then I spent some time in Paris in an academic program there, and then I actually spent some time in Beijing in an academic program there.
Wow.
And it was very different experiences, but both of those were really, really cool.
What kind of experiences?
Well, okay, so like the Paris experience, I mean, it's kind of like the study abroad in Europe experience. So like that was very much like what you would think. But it was awesome. It was a bilingual program, and so all of the people in the program were speaking at, like, the classes were both in English and in French. And
Mm.
so yeah, I was able to kind of just like go between the two. But the Beijing one was a academic program that was specifically for you to learn Mandarin. And so
Mm.
you actually had to, like, when you landed, you actually have to sign a contract that you wouldn't speak English for the next 3 months. And if they catch you speaking English, you have to go home. And
No.
so you were forced to
What
speak
if you say
Mandarin,
like
even if
okay?
you would say in a Chinese accent, I guess. You would say, okay, I don't know.
That's funny.
But it was tough, dude. But it was like, yeah, it was 8 hours a day of just like Chinese drills. And so at the end of it, and this was also 2016, which was like the height of like the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea island
Mm-hmm.
dispute. And so every time somebody asked me about like the islands, every time somebody found out I was Filipino, that was what they would ask me about. And so my script in my head to like argue against that stuff in Mandarin was so good. I've completely forgotten it. It was like that, like I was able to argue in that. I mean, I haven't had so like it's been so long since I practiced like exclusively speaking in Chinese, but where I work, there's a lot of Chinese. Like I work around the Chinatown area in New York, and so
Okay.
like during lunchtime, I usually just kind of like go to a Chinese restaurant and I just talk Chinese, and like they like
They lose
that's
their
how I keep that
mind.
up.
That's awesome.
I mean, if you're like if you look like us, they're not really that impressed, but
Yeah, like okay, I get it. Maybe,
yeah,
you
I
kind of
get
look
it.
like
Yeah,
us. My mom speaks
exactly.
Cantonese.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
great.
she worked in Hong Kong
Yeah.
for years, and I love it though because it's like we have a cheat code. When we go to a Chinese restaurant, and they like
Right,
sometimes
right.
the waiters are like talking shit, and she's
Yeah.
like, "These guys are talking shit about us." And then they'll
Yeah, you could tell.
come.
You could.
She won't say anything, and then they'll come to like like how to take the order, and then she'll speak like
Mhm.
Cantonese, and they're like, "Oh shit, she understands us."
Oh no, that's funny. Yeah, yeah. I like being in those moments as well. But Cantonese is great. I want to learn that one too. That's
Hmm.
awesome for your mom to speak that one. I'm sure she picked up a little Mandarin too. No,
She
in
knows
Hong
a
Kong.
little bit. Yes, she does. Knows a little
Yeah,
bit, but she's more of like I believe Cantonese more. Actually, I
that's
think
awesome.
mixing it a lot. But anyways, you said so you speak both, and you said earlier that you work for a museum. Like,
Yes.
did you plan that? Did you plan to go work for a museum?
I mean, I actually in college I trained to be a news editor.
Mm.
And so actually my major was in copy editing, which is like, the actual editing of articles and content, checking it for not just grammar, but just making sure that, editing copy.
Mhm.
Uh, but it also graduated at the same time as the kind of collapse of the journalism kind of like industry. And so I remember like in college, like we would have these guest lecturers who were supposed to tell us about how to, get your foot in the door and how to succeed as a journalist and things like that. But most of them were just recently fired or like
Oh
laid off.
no!
And so, yeah, and so like a lot of them were just like, if you work really hard, maybe you'll get a job in this industry. Like it was very like pessimistic. Um, and so for the first year or two out of school, I kind of like did that. And I did some freelance editing, and I worked in that kind of like world, but um, it was a tough one to kind of keep up. But I did gain kind of specific skills that were able to transfer to the nonprofit world. And here in New York, the museum kind of world is the nonprofit world. It's very, very interlinked. And so I got a job in at the 9/11 Museum, actually, which
Oh
was just
wow!
opening. It opened in 2014. Um, and I got a job in their operations. And I eventually transferred to the education department, and I did that for a few years, and then a I and then the 2016 U.S. elections happened, and then like there was this huge kind of like shift in a lot of people's minds here, especially the younger people, about like, oh, what really matters about being an American. And just kind of like I personally made the transition to like very much the nonprofit world, and I worked in immigration advocacy for 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
And so I worked there. I also kind of just like was also in the operations aspect of that.
Mm.
Um, and then I realized I missed museums. I liked like my first job even as a teenager was at a museum. It's
Mm.
actually the museum that you might be able to see in your background, but it's the Liberty Science Center, which is like a children's science museum or a family
Okay.
science museum. But like I just kind of miss being in a space where like people are coming in and they're excited to learn things and they're visiting from out of town, and you know you get to kind of interact with like people from all over. Um, and so I found a local museum here in New York that is very very much loved. It's called the Tenement Museum,
Mm-hmm.
and it tells a story of like immigrants from the 19th and 20th centuries here in New York. And I'm like, oh, this is like the perfect kind of combination of all of the things I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like I have a skill set in museum operations. I do have a passion for like telling immigrant stories, and you know, I like eating Chinese food, and so and it's by Chinatown. So um, I've been there for about a year and a half, and so
Amazing.
yeah, it's a good kind of combination of the things. It's a good place to be right now
I love
professionally.
that. I love that. Congratulations. You're
Thanks.
very interesting. I was going deep dive on your Instagram a little bit and I was looking at the,
Okay.
your posts, whatever. And one of the posts that I love was you post this video of you sitting down and you just reciting the rosary.
Oh, whoa! You went back, updated research. Come on,
Homie, I don't play, bro. I go deep.
you went back there. Yeah,
So yeah, I just like I love that you're like sitting there. Let's talk about that. Like how
sure.
were you did you stop reciting the rosary before that? Why did you come back and what
Oh
made you
yeah.
come back?
I mean, for me personally, um, the idea of ritual is really special.
Mm.
Um, I feel like as the generations go by, you know, religion plays it goes through waves, right? It like plays really deep roles, or sometimes people go through phases where like you know they don't keep up with their you know religious practice and things like that.
Mm.
I was raised a Catholic. I consider myself a Catholic, even though I should be going to church a lot more. Um, but um, I think what draws me to my religion is the ritual of it. And you
Mm.
know, a lot of people like to say things like, "Oh, I'm spiritual. I'm not religious," or you know, that's what they say. Like, "I'm not really religious. I'm spiritual."
Mm.
I'm actually kind of the other way around, where
Mm.
the spiritual aspect of it, like the idea of like you know praying to God and like having a deep relationship with people like Jesus and the Virgin Mary and things like that. I think it's really special, and I really commend that for like a lot of people because it really is like a solid foundation for people mentally
Mm.
and psychologically, and it gives them purpose. I think for me, I just find the ritual of it what gives what I find the ritual of it like kind of like the really valuable thing
Mm.
because I can tie it to people who don't share the faith that I share, right?
Mm.
I can tie it. I can find parallels with people who practice Hinduism or Islam or Judaism or things like that. Like we can kind of like find parallels in the way that we worship, even
Mm.
though what we worship it might be different.
Mm.
And I think in kind of like my place in life right now, that's kind of been what's special to me. And so something like the Rosary, which I grew up with, and like my mom would sit us down every night and like pray the Rosary. And I know that you know Monday's joyous, Tuesday is sorrowful, Thursday is luminous. You know, like I still remember that, but I also find opportunities to kind of like update it for myself. And I know that I could be accused of being a cafeteria Catholic in that sense, but you know, I've prayed rosaries in which this decade I dedicate to mentally the people in my life that are struggling, or like this
Mm.
next decade, these next Hail Marys, I'm dedicating to my own career. This next decade, I'm dedicating to people who are hungry in the streets of New York. Like I just do that mentally, and I think that's kind of like what keeps it special to me.
That's beautiful, man. I love that. Okay, so
Yeah.
now you're being quote unquote Catholic, trying religious, and being a member of the LGBTQ community. church
Hmm.
and LGBTQ, they don't they're like oil and water. How you personally, how do you um in your mind, how do you make them mix together?
I actually, when I was in college, I took this course. So I came out when I was in college, like
Mm,
towards the end of it. And like I had like kind of like denied myself like my identity for the longest time. And I was actually just like vocally just like against it, even though I like part of me knew that like I shouldn't be thinking or talking like this
mm,
because it's a disservice to myself.
mm,
Um, but I remember in college, I took this course called like the Vatican II and the Modern World.
mm,
And it was about how it was a history course about Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council,
mm,
which was the kind of like the council that brought the mass into the modern world. Stopped making Latin the main language, and the mass could be said in whatever language that you wanted. It
mm,
changes the orientation of the priest during the mass and things like that, and how it kind of like created these tensions within the Catholic Church, but it also created these tensions, or it also like redefined relationships within Christianity amongst denominations, and all of these things. And it was like a very interesting course. And the students in that course were very diverse as well. It wasn't just Catholic students; it was like people from all over.
mm.
And so it was the first time that I had to defend my religion in front of other people,
Wow.
because like if you grew up in Jersey, like Catholicism is kind of like a default faith, you know. It's kind of like the Philippines in that sense. Like,
Mm,
the it's a very diverse like ethnically place, but like Hispanics practice Catholicism, Irish people, Italians, Polish people.
mm,
It's so like Catholicism is like a default, so you never have to think about it.
mm,
And this was the first time I had to like do it, right?
mm,
Um, and so I had to look at it really objectively, but I also wanted to kind of like offer my perspective as from in my mind at that point in my life, a traditional Catholic. And there's this one point where I wanted to raise my hand and like offer kind of like this perspective.
mm.
And then the professor was just like, I'm going to stop you there because I know for a fact that you're Filipino. And there is something to be said about Filipino Catholics because their faith is so intertwined with their indigenous identity
Mm.
that it actually, at some points, does not align completely with what Roman teaching is. And that was the
Wow.
first time I ever thought of that.
Wow.
Um, that was the first time I ever thought about being Filipino and being Catholic as not exactly the same thing, right? Um, and as the years go by, and I do like I learn more about what indigenous practice has been in the Philippines,
Mhm,
um, and the things that in my own family I've I grew up doing, like Ilocanos like practicing something called atang, which is like that food offering at the beginning of a party, right? That you
mhm,
kind of like set aside some food for the ancestors, and we have our like every Filipino family has like a shrine, right? And we kind of make it a point to create that little altar, right?
mhm.
And I'm sure other ethnic groups have that. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's not very Catholic of us, because that's very much like idolatry, blah blah blah.
Mm.
And like the professor was like, yeah, like it's a beautiful it's a beautiful practice, but we have to. I want to make sure that we're like, for the sake of this course, we're thinking about this and so that actually this is how I'm answering your question about LGBT about being queer,
Mhm,
because that kind of like set off this whole idea of me kind of looking at the way that being Filipino specifically um, affects the way my Catholicism had been practiced.
mm,
Um, because the Philippine society, as conservative as it is, as religious, as Catholic as it can be, as religious as it can be, is also very much has a reputation for being accepting in some regards to queer people, whether it be in our entertainment, whether it be in our
mhm,
society, right? Like there isn't kind of like this that same enthusiasm for violence against queer people as
mhm.
other kind of conservative Catholic societies. Um, and so like, yeah, I was discovering myself as a queer person in the context of like being an American and kind of just like being a young millennial and like in this area. But I was also very, very um that was also like a huge part of it. It's just like, oh, okay, well, this is why it doesn't like the conservative Catholic part of me, the one that is educated in like American media, American Catholic media, right? Like we have this channel called EWTN,
Mm.
And it's just kind of like a very conservative Catholic TV channel. It's like that's not. It wasn't completely. I realized that it wasn't completely in alignment with what how a Filipino Catholic practices or like approaches sexuality or things like that.
Mm.
Because Filipino Catholics approach a lot of things differently from like the mainstream Catholic. It approaches ancestors differently. It approaches we approach nature differently, right? We view nature as a collection of spirits rather than organic things, right? And like that's just part of our culture. We walk through forests and we ask the spirits to allow us to walk through forest. Like these are things that are
Tabi-tabi
just like
po.
tabi-tabi po. We brought in like a bunch of plants from the outside because it's getting cold here.
Mm.
And the plants are now crowding our bedroom. And I was walking through my bedroom. I very instinctively said "tabi tabi po," and like my husband was like, "Yeah." And then my husband was like, "What was that?" And I had to. I caught myself, and I was like, I had to explain it to my husband.
I still do it. I still do it.
Yeah, I like because these plants are like huge now, and they're taking up the space. But yeah, and so like I think my kind of like my sexuality is actually just like kind of part of that in my head because I'm like, yeah, it's actually yeah, it is contradictory, but like like my identity isn't contradictory, right? I'm like being a Filipino is being contradictory. You're like 300 years of colonial mentality and you have to kind of and we as immigrants are like going into these colonized spaces like the US and Canada, they're colonies and things like that, and so and they're colonizing spaces, and so that's how I make peace with it, by just allowing by allowing the different things, the contradictions to live in peace with each other. And here in New York, I think it's actually it's kind of a blessing for me, at least, that here in New York you can find church communities that are actually pretty welcoming to the queer community, like solidly Catholic churches that are very much in communion with the archdiocese, but they have a gay ministry and things like that. Like the church that I go to, it's like 30% gay guys, and like it's nice.
Oh, of course. But I like what you said, that the Philippines is so open and welcoming with gay people, because yes, I went back 2019. There were so much gay kids.
Everyone's gay. Everyone's gay now.
Everyone's gay. I was
gay,
like,
dude.
like, let's say if you see a group of kids walking, preteens or teenagers, if you see a group of girls walking, let's say 4 girls, I can guarantee you there's one gay guy walking with them.
Yeah, of course.
I'm like,
of course.
Where are they coming from? There's so much of them. I mean, growing up there was a lot, but this time it's like a lot.
Yeah, or even like with like the groups of guys, like the tropa, and you can see like at least one of them. There's like the one gay guy now, and it's like that's nice, that's cool.
Yeah, this is like, okay, this is our gay friend that we don't give a shit if he's gay or not.
Yeah, so it's good. It's really heartening to see, and especially for the younger generations, just like being able to kind of like live that. I think a lot of it in the past has just been very powerful people in the clergy and in the government who have these like really strong opinions, being able to drown out the majority of Filipinos who actually don't have a problem with it. And I think now there's less of that power there, and it's a little bit more dispersed, and so like normal people can just like enjoy.
Yeah, I agree that like growing up there is just like, oh, that's the uncle that is gay or the cousin that is gay. That's it. It wasn't like a big deal. Like, I don't think there's like a coming out thing in the Philippines, to be honest. We just know you're gay. That's
great.
it.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell.
Like you kind of can tell, but if a guy's like kind of acting gay, or like there's rumors that he's gay, like, yeah, he doesn't have to say it. Like, okay, cool, he's gay. He's not gonna get. Of course, sometimes there's bullying, but really, no one cares.
Yeah, people don't really care. Yeah,
it's not like in the Western way, like you mentioned earlier, like you came out. Like there's no like, oh, I can guarantee you, if they're in the Philippines, like out of maybe 20 gays, maybe one quote unquote came out. The rest are like,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody knows.
Yeah, and that's really special. And even I can't speak for the way kids come out these days, but I feel like that is just kind of like a point. There's always has to be like a turning point, and like for like the younger generation, it's like there's no turning point. It's just like, and that's cool.
Yeah, it is like becoming cool. Like back before, I guess for you, it's like the quote of the part of your hero's journey. This is the time the
Yeah,
hero goes travel and see the
right.
world and experience the world.
They don't know how to struggle.
These kids these days,
Yeah.
But let's go back to your Baybayin. How did you get into
Uh-huh.
Baybayin?
I was a nerd, dude. I fucking I loved like Lord of the Rings and shit. Like I loved Tengwar. Tengwar is the writing system that was used to write Elvish. And I was like just obsessed with like learning the Elvish. You know that there are Elvish dialects. This motherfucker created dialects for his lore.
Yeah, these
You
people
know,
are
there
learning
was
Elvish. I'm like, yo, learn French maybe.
no. They're like people are like, well, which dialect of Elvish are you learning? Are you learning Quenya? Are you learning Sindarin? Are you learning High Elvish? I'm like, bitch, I was learning Sindarin, basically. But I was just obsessed with writing systems and things like that. And then one day I came across like I don't know what it was, like one of these GeoCities websites, Angel Fire,
Hmm.
and it was by and shout out Christian Kabwai.
My
He's
boy.
yeah, it was by him, and it was like basically he was kind of like one of like the forefathers of Americans or people on the internet finding out about Baybayin. Everybody who knows about Baybayin knows about Christian Kabwai.
They have to.
Yeah,
Former
um,
guest.
really.
Yes.
There you go.
I was
I
actually
didn't
just
scroll that
texting
far.
him just this morning.
That's what's up. Well,
Yeah.
tell him I tell him he was my origin story,
Will do.
along
Will
with a
do.
lot of people. But he also has a very distinct style,
Mm-hmm.
and he also has a huge passion for like kind of using that style to in different media and things like that, which is awesome.
Hmm.
That was the first time I knew about the creation or the exist. Sorry, that was the first time I knew about the existence of a pre-colonial writing system. That's the first time that like I had even kind of like considered like a Philippines before the Philippines and things like that.
Mm.
And it was awesome. And then like for years and years that was like kind of like the only resource, right? It was just like that one website. I don't even remember what it's called, where you can like type in your name and then like it'll give you like this janky kind of like transliteration.
Terrible translation.
Yeah, with like a very Unicode, like the one font, right? That's
Mm.
like it's not kerned correctly and things like that. A shout out to whoever created that. But then as the years go by, more resources come up. You'll realize that more people have done kind of like scholarly work on this stuff than others, and so um, it was just something that kind of like I kept to myself, and I would just doodle in the margins of like my notebooks and things like that. And like whenever I would hear a word either in English or Tagalog or anything, I would see like, oh, how would you write this? Blah blah blah. And then eventually over the years, I kind of developed my own style, my own kind of like handwriting, and it's like this thing that people started like recognizing in my social circle. And as more people kind of found out about Baybayin in the Filipino social circle, they were like, "Hey, Mark, can you actually kind of like write this down to show me what it looks like?" And then I would, and then they would come back like a month later with it tattooed on their bodies. And then I'm like, "Holy shit! People are walking down with my handwriting."
That's
Oh, they're walking around
amazing.
with my handwriting. Yeah, it's cool. And I was just doing that for free. Like it was just something that I thought was like fun to share. Um, and then honestly, this time last year, people were like, you should like do this for serious, right? Like don't like I don't know if there's enough capacity for you to quit your job and like start throwing everything in there. But people are coming for you for commissions. People are asking you to like design these cute little things. I'm like, you should start kind of like offering it to people and seeing if you can kind of start talking to people, right, about it in a more official way. Because along with like all of this like professional stuff I've been doing, I was also just continually working as a community organizer with the Filipino American community, especially the student community. I started in college as like a member of my student association. I became the co-president of the Rutgers Student Association. And then when I graduated, I moved on to kind of like this young professionals network. And it just continued. I just continued to find opportunities to like engage with people in these very specific ways. And sometimes they would ask me to come in and just like talk about Filipino linguistics and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I would love to talk about these like really random things that would otherwise never come up, like ergativity in Philippine languages, which is like this very specific thing that are very that makes Filipino like that makes learning Filipino very difficult for non-native speakers. And I can talk about that for hours. But yeah, so I mean, after college, I would like go to like student run conferences and stuff and just kind of talk about just basic stuff about like the rich history of Philippine languages, the beauty of our languages, you know, the kind of just like the poetic aspect to very basic things like why is kaibigan so pretty as a word as opposed to just friend, and it's because it's made of like all of these little parts that are just like, oh god, this means reciprocality and the essence of something, and then an means vessel, and then like ibig means like love, and so it's just like the vessel where your reciprocal love lives. That's what a friend is. Like I would just like go around and say
What a
that hippy
nerd!
dippy shit, but it's like nice, you know.
I love it.
Yeah, and then like I would kind of just also do like a little kind of introduction to what Baybayin is and things like that. And so I was just doing that on a volunteer basis as a organizer, educator, things like that, because we just wanted to kind of keep the momentum of that college experience going, where we're just like, oh, well, Filipino college students have like that ability to kind of meet up and just talk about these. But once you go into the real world, that really doesn't exist for us. And we have to exist in these mostly white spaces, and we have to kind of like shut that part of us off. Luckily, I think our generation is like being very intentional about creating Filipino spaces. And so now here in New York, you have all of these like kind of like networks, you have all of these nonprofits, you have these groups, you have these kind of like associations of vendors and things like that that are filled with young energy around this stuff. And so there are like kind of like markets now, and then there are these like fairs and like these art shows and gatherings and pop-ups. And I'm like, you know what, maybe it would be a good idea for me to kind of just like introduce myself into these worlds, right, into these worlds of pop-ups and markets and things like that, and see if there is an interest in that. And so yeah, last year I started kind of like approaching these organizers just like, hey, if you want like a booth of somebody just kind of like taking on-site commissions where people are like, oh yeah, can you write my girlfriend's name in Baybayin? And I'll come through, I'll wear some ethnic ass fabric, and
The
I'll
malong.
bring I'll wear my long, and then like I'll buy a brush from the local Chinese shop, and then like we'll see what happens. And you know, it got attention, and so that's basically kind of where this all of this kind of energy has been. It's just like a lot of people reaching out, and you know, it's not like my full-time thing right now. Maybe one day it will be, but right now it's just like this thing that I'm able to do, like outside of the 9 to 5, and kind of just be able to kind of like offer these small things, and they've expanded, and I've started to create like these like a map series where it's like
Yes. Fire, bro.
thanks,
Fire.
thanks, dude. Yeah. I'm like, if you have a suggestion, like whatever city, let me know. I got to work on Metro Manila. I got to work on like San Diego. But right now we have like the tri-state area, we have LA, we have the Bay Area. But yeah, it's just cool to be able to see these maps in our script.
How did you come up with that idea? Because when I saw that map, I'm like, yo, what's up, homie? This is awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. We have a map in our living room, and it's like it's a world map, and it's every nation's name in the language of that nation, and it's cool.
That is cool.
You would have like Canada, and then you have like United States, but then like you wouldn't have China, you would have 中国, right? And then you would have La France, and then you would have República ng Pilipinas, right? And you would
Mm,
have it in there. And I'm
mm.
like, wait, why is República ng Pilipinas in like Spanish letters? Like it should be in Baybayin, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that's kind of where it came from. And like I would put together these kind of like slide decks for like presentations for student groups. And I would see that there are artists in the Philippines who are like reimagining logos in Baybayin and like
Mm,
reimagining. I'm so like, okay, what well, you can reimagine where I live, right? We can reimagine these things that we refer to all the time and are
mm.
used to it. Um, and yeah, it's just like uh, a map of the Philippines in Baybayin with no context, right? There's no desire to translate it for other people. Like if we lived in a fantasy world where Baybayin was the only writing system for our language, then that's what it would look like, and it would be really
Mm.
special. So, I would also love to. I'm still working on them. I'm still kind of figuring out the best way to like translate things. Like La Unión is a Spanish word. Like, how do you should I have like translated that to Samahan? Because it's like the idea of a union,
Yeah, I
like a
read about this.
togetherness.
They're saying that it's a if it's a Western language, it's hard. It's either you do the way like you translate the word into the Tagalog word,
Right.
or you write it like how would you say it, how you pronounce it.
Yeah. So
But
if you
it's
like read
complicated.
Baybayin, and if you look at the map that I created, like I was not very consistent. And I think that's fine because there are no rules.
Not
Like I
really.
would, yeah.
Not really.
So like I've translated La Unión as La Unión, but like Eastern Samar, I think I wrote like Silangang Samar.
I like it. You know
Yeah.
what, dude? You know what I like that though is because it shows you a different perspective of how could you translate Baybayin. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I talked to Christian Kabuay and one of his who became friend, yeah, Jacob Ira. He's one of
Oh shit, you talked to him too?
yeah, he's a former guest too. These are like if I'm writing something, I'm like, yo, dude, how can I write? Is this right? Is this proper?
Right.
So they
Right.
kind of help me out. There's somehow they're my mentors, but that's what the first thing they told me is if it's a Western word, you have to translate it first. That's the first key. I don't know if it is the
Mhm.
rule. That's what they told me.
I mean, who made the rules?
Nobody,
Who made the rules?
no one.
Yeah.
There's no book about Baybayin that says like from our ancestors.
Right.
No one.
Yeah, until there's like a national kind of like committee creating rules around this, like the
Mm.
French have l'Académie Française, which is like, or like even the Québécois,
Québécois,
like
la langue française.
they, yeah, they are so strict,
Mm.
like they are so against the inclusion of foreign words. But that's also antithetical to the Philippine experience. Like
Mm.
we are a people that is a result of foreign influence. Like you can't deny that. And so like just to deny that 400 years of change is kind of like dishonest. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the things I think about. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe we should just transliterate these English ass words. I don't know. Because the majority of Filipinos don't even know that tinidor is a Spanish word or
No, there's so much like Sibuyas.
sibuyas.
You
Yeah,
don't even know
exactly.
the Spanish. Like that's Spanish. Yeah, it's Spanish actually.
Yeah, like 70% of the words in Bahay Kubo are
Yeah, I know. But that's one thing I love about our language is because you'll see these words like, oh, that's Spanish. Oh, that's English. Oh, that's Hindi or that's Japanese.
Mhm.
It's so I think it's one of the most wonderful thing about our culture is how mixed we are.
Yeah.
Just the
And
food
in
is
ways
like
that we wouldn't
increased.
even, yeah,
Mm.
it's the food, it's influences that we didn't even like know we had. Like I read somewhere that 11% of Tagalog vocabulary is actually Nahuas, which is
Mm.
like indigenous Central American, like Aztec Mayan,
No
like
way.
that kind of family. Yeah, yeah. It's
Wow.
like the word nanay is actually from Central Mexico area, and it's related to the Nahuas word
I don't know
nant.
this.
Yeah, Nahuatl is
Wow.
like the name, the name of the language, and like Nantl is the name of mother, and that became Nanay. And then
Wow.
Tatl became Tatay. Like we have these words
Oh,
from
there is a word that apparently is big in Haiti, and there's you can only find that word in the Philippines, and
what
it's
is
the
it?
exact same word, and it means
Is
the
it
same.
Bagay?
I think it's bagay.
Yeah,
I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? How is it possible that this tiny island
yeah,
across the Pacific knows the same word and
yeah.
equals the same?
Yeah, I like Haitian Creole is actually one of the main languages of New York. So New York
Mm,
City actually has 10 languages like
mhm,
that is used in government. And I heard Haitian Creole speakers say bagay, and I'm like, how do you know that word? It's like my
mm.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny. I love language. It's such an interesting thing, you know.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of language, I heard somewhere, I don't know if it's still the case, that you don't speak fluent Tagalog.
Oh no, no. I can just like I can fake it.
So how does it affect your art? How you translate or how you write Baybayin?
I think it. I mean, it's more a curse than a blessing, obviously.
Mm,
Um, but there's an objectivity because like Taglish is kind of like where I'm most comfortable. You
mm.
know, when you go to when you go to QC and like you pick Taglish as like, and then ATM you pick Taglish as the option instead of English. That's me. um, but I it's very interesting to be like that voice of like, oh, this is how you do it, especially when like native Tagalog speakers or like people who grew up in the Philippines come to my booth
Mm,
and they're asking me all these questions. I'm just like, oh no, I feel like you should be telling me this stuff. And so as an academic practice, I feel like, I can stand on it. But obviously when it comes to being able to kind of like when someone is just like, hey, can you translate this phrase that I want to do? Or for
mm,
example, I had this one person who had come up to me, or had reached out to me, and he was Jewish and he got married. And in
mm,
the Jewish tradition, you have this thing called a ketubah, which is like a contract which is done in like Hebrew, and then there usually is like a there can be an English translation, and
mm,
it's like it's beautiful and it's very beautifully decorated, and it's you usually frame it in your house and things like
mm,
that, and it's like um the details of the marriage. It also contains the vows of the spouses and things like that,
mm.
and his spouse is Filipino, and he's like, oh, can you translate this sacred Jewish document? Can you number one translate it in Tagalog and number two do it in Baybayin? I'm like, I could do the second one. Um, but it also gives me an opportunity to work with people who could do that and
Mm.
and learn much more about the language, and learn more about kind of the idea of deep Tagalog, right? Because
Mhm.
I get by in the world with my Taglish and with my like kind of just like I can switch to Tagalog when I need to like share a secret or whatever. um, or like when I talk to my parents, I'm speaking in Tagalog
Mm,
because they're getting older and that's what they're comfortable with.
mhm,
But it's domestic Tagalog, it's household Tagalog, right?
mhm,
It's not the Tagalog you would use to kind of like educate and things like
mhm,
that in like a deep way. And so I'm getting to learn more about like what people consider to be deep when in my head it wasn't even existent, right? And like
mm,
when it comes to Baybayin, where you want to be as pure as possible, you're like, okay, so how would you say email? Like in a practical situation in which like we're
mm.
using Baybayin to communicate, because as that's an exercise that I do with some people.
It's
Like we
beautiful.
actually, like text each other in Baybayin to see what happens, and like, okay, if I'm gonna say I'm gonna email you, how do you write email? Do you write email or do you look up how you would say that in Tagalog? And then I found out that in Tagalog there is a word for email and it's sulatronico.
Uh, I don't know. That is not Tagalog. I can tell you right now.
I know.
That
I mean, I was like,
is Spagalog, I guess, Spanish
Tagalog.
Tagalog, you know?
Yeah. Taganyol.
Exactly. Something like that.
Yeah, but it's like also just kind of like a fun exercise in seeing like how 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 practical, like, a Baybayin only world could be and things like
Mm,
that. And so yeah, it's the relationship with, and also like as an Ilocano, it's just like, okay, well, um, this is how you like do the spelling rules change because Ilocano has very specific kind
mhm,
of like modifications to our alphabet for sounds that don't exist
mhm.
in standard Filipino and things like that. And so like those are definitely things that I think about. And so yeah, the fact that my language is actually like this hybrid Ilocano Tagalog English thing growing up has has allowed me to think about things more creatively.
Yeah, I love it. I do. That's one thing I loved when I start refreshing my buying knowledge is like I it thought I speak fluent Tagalog. Well, I'd like
Mhm.
to think I speak fluent Tagalog, but then I'll think of a word. I'm like, what is that word? I don't even know that word, and then I have to review myself, and then I'll learn like, oh yeah, that's the word that my grandma used to say.
Mhm.
Which I forget. As you know, you don't practice your language, it will go away,
Right, right, right.
right? So,
Tama.
tama, exactly. Like I said, I grew up speaking Tagalog, like deep Tagalog.
Mhm.
And sometimes, I'll speak Tagalog with my family, but like you said, domestic Tagalog. And then we'll be like an old person that comes from back home and will speak Tagalog. And
Absolutely
like,
nothing. Yeah.
and then I'll be like, oh shit, I forgot that word.
Right, right,
And
right.
it's like opening a box of toys that you haven't played in a while. I'm like, oh, I remember this toy. It's a beautiful toy that I
Yeah.
enjoy so much. That's one
Yeah.
thing I love about that. One thing about learning back by Bayen and Tagalog.
Yeah.
Do you
And
speak
I
Ilocano
remember
though? Sorry.
my Ilocano is, so I remember you were like actually interviewing someone who could understand completely Tagalog, but
Mm.
like was having problems or like reading it. I forgot
Hmm.
what
I
they
don't
were.
remember this one.
Oh, but it was somebody who was like, yeah, my comprehension of Tagalog is absolutely perfect, but I can't put together a single sentence or something.
Yeah, sometimes I like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
funny, like sometimes I'll speak to because I love speaking Tagalog because at home my wife is Canadian, Italian, Irish,
Uh-huh.
so there's no Tagalog in the house. Well,
Hmm.
I speak to my kid, but they just look at me. I'm stupid, unless
Uh-huh.
I'm angry. When I'm angry, then they understand that.
Very good.
And
At least you're keeping it up.
yeah, and so when I speak to sometimes I speak to my family and I start speaking English, and sometimes I'm like, I castigate myself for it. I'm like, no, dude, speak Tagalog,
There you go.
right?
You
Yeah.
need to. Yeah. Yeah. I that's definitely something that most Filipino Americans like are kind of resent because obviously our parents wanted us to function in English, no problem.
Mm, mm,
But then we had to, sacrifice that part of us. Um, but I actually found like the one Ilocano tutor online last year,
mm.
and I
Nice.
started taking Ilocano lessons
Oh,
because I
sweet.
do want to get good at it. I can understand it, but I can't put together sentences. I'm much better at Tagalog. Um, and but my parents are getting old, and I could already see that my father himself is like he's kind of reverting to this world where like it's a very Filipino world. Like he had to learn English to be here in America, but now he's spending half the year in the Philippines. He's not really talking to other like non-Filipinos now because he only talks to his kids. And so I'm like, damn, I should learn Ilocano because he's gonna not want to speak English anymore. I'm like, yeah. So I'm on the race. I'm on a race against the clock. Um, but it's funny too because like my family, like we don't function in English, and so like when my husband's Black American, like he's American. um he when he's in the room, my parents like talk to him in Tagalog, and like he doesn't know what's going on. But after 10 years, like he's learned to kind of just like smile until the context clues give him
Mm, yes,
tell
yes,
me
yes,
what's
yes.
going on.
That's my wife is better now with Tagalog. She doesn't speak it, but
Uh-huh.
she'll get it. Like when they do chismes,
Oh, there
they'll
you go.
they'll she'll understand. So sometimes I'm in the other room and the women are just chismissing on the other in the
Uh-huh.
other room. If it's a complete English the whole time, because I'm still listening, and I'll just yell English, and
Oh
then
no,
they
she's
get
gotta learn.
mad, and then you're like, learn Tagalog. You have to learn. Like you cannot teach her how to learn. Doesn't make sense,
I agree. No, gotta do it. You gotta do it.
But yeah, she is
Yeah.
learning. It's funny when she comes from like when she goes to the store because she goes to the Filipino store. She loves the
There you
Filipino.
go.
She
Yeah.
goes like, oh, I saw this group and they're saying it was mahal. The food was mahal, mahal. I'm like, hey, stop listening to my people, man.
Oh, I encourage it. I'm like an enabler.
No, me
And
too.
so
I love when she's like she tries, or sometimes we're walking down the aisle of the store and she's like she sees them and she looks at me. I'm like yeah, that's my people. I can smell them.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, Darnell does this thing too, where he started kind of like he would do an interaction with the Filipino, but like on his way out, especially when it's like at a store, he'd be like "Salamat po" or like whatever.
I
And
love it.
yeah,
That's
yeah, it'd be nice.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
I think we're there, my man. Thank you so much for coming on
Oh
the
man,
podcast.
this was a great time.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we close
Yeah.
out, do you have any last remark or any message or whatever?
Oh, I mean, yeah, like and subscribe. Basically, just find me on Instagram, TK
Again.
Baybayin.
Mhm.
Um, if you have suggestions on maps that you want to see, let
Mm,
me know.
mm.
Happy Filipino American History Month.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it.
Yeah, it's a big thing here. We're trying to make it a big thing. There's a lot. Um, learn your history, and as in terms of Filipino history, kind of like think about Filipino history on a global scale because we are a global people.
Mm,
And I think that's something that we need to start owning. As the as a people who tends to be seen as like the servants of the world, especially in a lot of different parts of the world.
mm.
Like we kind of view ourselves as visitors there, but we belong wherever we go. And I think that's something um, to tie into like the theme of your podcast of like an immigrant's life. It's like, oh well, there are a lot of different factors in history that have brought us to this very space,
Mhm.
and so kind of like don't be afraid to take up the space in there because especially if it's a place where your voice isn't very much heard or your community isn't very much like at the forefront or the center. That's even more of a reason to show off who you are. And as Filipinos, I think that's something that we're finally getting to realize in our media, and we have the tools online to do that, and your podcast and things like that. So I am very appreciative of this opportunity, and I wish you all the success for very selfish reasons because I want to see our faces on more things.
Of course. Again, maraming salamat po, Manong.
Salamat,
Thank you po.
salamat, salamat.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. Good night.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Again, Mark, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.